Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our latest virtual learning cafe on all about the Safe Taskforce. We're just going to give it a couple more minutes. Apologies, we're slightly over time for starting. It's just we've got a lot of people waiting to get in from the lobby, so we'll just let them all in, and then we'll be able to make a start. Okay, I think we'll make a start. I think probably a few more people will be joining us as we go. Thank you so much for joining us today. We've had a fantastic level of interest in this particular virtual learning cafe, and we hope it will be really interesting. We have today Ed Boggis and Alice Lyon from the Department for Education. Ed and Alice will be talking about the SAFE Task Force, which, for those that don't know, stands for Support, Attend, Fulfil, and Exceed, and is specifically for young people at risk of violence and is offering a range of interventions in school. The task force are led, the multi-agency partnerships, but they are led by education. And there are 10 task forces around England. They will be talking about the programme, why it was set up, what we're hoping to achieve from that, and also how we plan to evaluate. We'll then have a brief pause there and talk for any questions that you have for Ed and Alice. If you've got any project specific questions, keep those to yourselves until we've heard from Bradford and Haringey. So we've then got Anna Wallace and Jeremy Swire from the Bradford Safe Task Force area, and then Ginny Thorne from Haringey, who will be talking through their projects and how those projects are going. Before we start, I just need to let you know that we are recording this session. If you don't want to be on camera, please feel free to turn your camera off, and also to remind everybody to keep their mic muted at all times unless you are talking, otherwise we'll get feedback and interference. We will be sending out a link to the slides and the recording after this event to all attendees, and we will be uploading the recording and the slides to our website. So please feel free to have a look and also to share with any colleagues that you might have who've not been able to attend today. So without further ado, I am going to hand over to Ed, who's going to take us through the first presentation. Thanks, Ed.
Hi all, can I just check you can hear me? My microphone's working. That's a nod of the head. Perfectly, thank you. So hi all, firstly I just want to say thank you to Gail, Violetta and the Youth Endowment Fund for setting up these virtual learning cafe sessions and inviting us along to speak to you all today. My name's Ed. I am the Head of Policy for the Education, Engagement and Serious Violence Unit at the Department for Education. And we're here to speak to you, as Gail said, about the SAFE programme. I'll give a short introduction explaining what the SAFE programme is, what we hope to achieve, and I'll then hand over to Alice, who will speak about the evaluation before Anna, Jeremy and Ginny cover the most interesting session, which is taking you through their experiences in Bradford and Haringey. So how does SAFE come about? So as we all know, serious violence is ruining the lives of too many young people, both as victims and perpetrators, and disengaging from education can be a significant risk factor in this. So we wanted to empower groups of schools to identify and commission the right support for young people whose attendance and behaviour are impeding their learning and leaving them exposed to involvement in serious violence, gangs, county lines, and other things. As a result, in 2022, we invited each of the top 10 serious violence hotspot areas to set up a SAFE task force. which would be led by schools to deliver evidence-based interventions to support young people with challenging behaviour, enabling them to attend school regularly so they can fulfil their potential and exceed their expectations. So you can see where we got the SAFE acronym from. The SAFE programme itself is one of 2 programmes that the unit I work in is running, that is testing new ways to support children most at risk of serious violence. We hope that by running these 2 programmes, we will help build the evidence base on what works and provide support to children and young people who need it. My colleagues came and spoke about the Alternative Provision Specialist Taskforce programme in December, which is testing a specialist workforce model located within alternative provision schools. You can find that recording on YEF's website, so I'd encourage you to, when you have time, go and watch that back if you haven't seen it already. But this programme, the SAFE programme, is more upstream, supporting children in mainstream schools with earlier interventions. It was announced back in the government's Beating Crime Plan, and as with APST, it is about reducing serious violence. It's operating in the 10 local authority areas with the highest volume of serious violence. That is measured using a combination of police and hospital data. So for the setup of the programme, initially each area was supported to create a school-led task force. We know that the education landscape varies regionally, so local areas could determine the exact structure of their task force. This meant that some areas utilised existing structures to fulfil the role of a safe task force or created something brand new. The task forces also don't have to be chaired by schools. For example, some are chaired by local authorities, charities, and the school improvement companies. But schools play a key role in their creation and ongoing approach. Other members, such as representatives from local violence reduction units, police, other education experts, and local authority, also often sit on these task forces. So it's our intention that by bringing schools together like this with other partners, we can create stronger relationships and also give the power to schools to select and deliver the interventions for the children in their area who need it most. The task forces are expected to support children in years 7 to 9 who've started to disengage from education or in close proximity to serious violence. Whilst some of the task forces have supported children as they move from year 6 to year 7, and some have supported children beyond year 9, particularly, for example, if those children had already started an intervention, it wouldn't end just because they left year 9. But the majority of the work is aimed at those 2 years, 7 to 9. The task forces are given a pot of funding to spend on interventions to improve social, emotional regulation and well-being, improve school attendance, behaviour, and ultimately reduce that vulnerability to serious violence. To do this, we asked each task force to produce a strategic needs assessment followed by delivery plans for each year of delivery. So this provides clearly evidence reasoning for the type of interventions that are commissioned so that they meet the needs of the children and young people in each area. So then using the strategic needs assessment, we asked task forces to choose and commission interventions to tackle the needs in their area. As you can see from the map on this slide, there is quite a variety in the interventions that are being delivered. Apologies if the wording's a little bit small, but hopefully you can make it out. In particular, you can see that there's a range in the number of interventions that different areas are providing. So, for example, some like Bradford are providing several different types of interventions, whereas others like Manchester have a focus on a fewer types. There's also a range in the number of children each intervention supports. And areas have used really innovative and localized approaches, making the most of what is available to them. So, for example, there's a really good program using outdoor and survival skills in the Peak District as part of social skills training. And this is something we really keen to see and hope to get by empowering schools to identify and commission the right support for their area. We did place a few requirements on the commissioning of interventions, so crucially that they are evidence-based and that at least one of the interventions is selected from those with that strongest evidence base, so the 3 that are listed on this slide. Each task force also provides theories of change for the interventions and links them back to the strategic needs assessment. Most of the referrals for these interventions are provided through schools, but we do know of a small number that come from other sources like youth justice services, the police, and children's social care. Our main intention with this is to make the support as accessible as possible, but getting to those children that really need it most. So the programme itself is being independently evaluated, and Alice will talk about this very shortly, but we've been collecting feedback and metrics throughout the programme as it's been delivering interventions. These generally show a really positive picture where effective and accessible interventions are being delivered to the children who need it in each area. We've been told that empowering schools to make decisions based on their knowledge of local needs has meant that they can design and commission interventions that effectively engage children and schools. We've also been told that although bringing schools and other partners together into a task force can be difficult and provide some challenges at first, particularly given the demands on everyone's time, now that these task forces are set up, it's really improved relationships and joint working across different agencies and organisations. As you can see on this slide, we've also reached over 2,100 pupils in the academic year 22-23. And as we move into 23-24, more interventions are coming online, and we hope to continue that reach. It's also been really great to hear firsthand about the impact the programme has had, and hopefully we'll hear more about that from Jeremy, Anna and Ginny very shortly. Lastly, just before I hand over to Alice, I just want to say that although we're currently in the evaluation, we're also looking to share information that we've gathered through the programme, through sessions like this, and we've also created a web page on gov.uk to share further information. So I'll put that into the chat, but we're very keen to come and chat about the programme. So I'm going to pass over to Alice now, who is going to briefly touch on the evaluation.
Thanks, Ed. If you can move to the next slide, please. And one more. Thanks. Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm Alice. So I am an analyst working at DFE. So my role involves kind of supporting with the evaluation of SAFE. So I'm just going to give you a bit of an overview of kind of how SAFE is being evaluated as a programme. So the evaluation is independent from DFE, and it's been funded and commissioned by the Youth Endowment Fund. And then it's being carried out by RAND Europe, the FFT Data Lab, and the University of Westminster. So in terms of timelines for the project, so it covers the kind of lifespan of the SAFE programme. So it started in November 2021, and it will be running until 2026. So the findings from the evaluation will be published, and this will also be available in 2026. So the kind of evaluation project has 3 different strands of work. So these are a process evaluation, which is to understand the implementation of SAFE for schools, staff, DFE, as well as local areas. An impact evaluation, and this is to assess and estimate the impact of the SAFE programme on a range of different pupil outcomes. And then they'll also be undertaking a cost evaluation, and this is just to understand basically the kind of cost of delivering SAFE for government as well as for task forces. So in terms of kind of the approach to the evaluation, so it's using a mixed methods design, and this is being used to enable both qualitative and quantitative data to be utilised. So some of the methods that the evaluation team are using to gather kind of this data and information are surveys, focus groups and interviews, observation of meetings and kind of the reviewing of various different documents, as well as kind of information from other sources. Then they'll also be utilising administrative data. So this is at the pupil level and is from the National Pupil Database. Next slide, please. So just to go into a little bit more detail about the kind of 3 work strands that I just mentioned. So these kind of 3 different components are there to enable us to evaluate the delivery, effectiveness and associated costs of the programme, as I said, kind of across its whole lifespan. So the process evaluation is there to kind of assess the different activities involved in the programme's implementation and the pathways by which it's being delivered. So, as I said, it aims to evaluate the programme from setup and then all throughout its life, and is there to kind of help us understand how the 10 SAFE task forces were established, their operationalisation, and then looking at the implementation of interventions, so what the barriers and facilitators to implementation were, and then also trying to identify what the mechanisms of change have been. We'll also be looking to identify any unintended consequences of SAFE task force work, so thinking about as well like what the experiences and perceptions are of those not involved as well as those who are involved within SAFE. And then also the process evaluation is a really useful information source to help inform kind of ongoing feedback and lessons learned, and they'll be feeding back to EF, DFE as well as task forces themselves. Then the impact evaluation, so this is looking to assess how effective the programme is as a whole in bringing about the kind of desired outcomes of the programme. So we'll be looking at this from a whole programme level, and we'll be using a quasi-experimental design to estimate the impact of SAFE. And this is this kind of approach is being used due to the fact that the 10 areas have been selected as I said, because they're considered to be serious violence hotspots, and also because the pupils receiving interventions have been selected based on certain kind of eligibility criteria, so they haven't been randomised. And this kind of quasi-experimental design approach is used when it's not possible or ethical to randomise participants to treatment and control groups. So there's various different techniques that can be used to try and develop a kind of counterfactual or comparison group to look at kind of effectiveness and causality. So the evaluation team are kind of working through finding the most appropriate technique to use to carry out the impact evaluation at the moment. They're also working to understand whether, as part of that, we can look at some of the individual level interventions and whether these can be evaluated as part of the whole programme impact evaluation as well. And then the third work strand is just that cost evaluation. So as I said, this is kind of looking to describe the full costs which have been associated with delivery. So that's both at the programme level and then also at the task force level. And it'll be looking at kind of between area cost variations and some of the reasons behind this. Next slide, please. And then finally, just to go into a little bit more detail on the kind of sampling and outcomes, which is being used as part of the evaluation. So sampling is being carried out at different organisational levels and with a range of different participants. And this is to, kind of collect a comprehensive range of information and data to help inform those evaluation findings. So as examples, so we'll be collecting data from task forces, and this is through surveys, focus groups and interviews. Also looking at collecting local area information, so from stakeholders, both those within SAFE and those kind of not involved in SAFE, helping to look at local partner agencies and local structures. Also be collecting data from schools, again, kind of those who are either within a task force or who are delivering interventions, but also those schools and SAFE areas which are not part of SAFE. And then finally, we are also collecting kind of pupil level information. So this is through unique pupil numbers, and this allows us to match these to the national pupil database, and then we can collect information, data on various kind of educational outcomes through that data source. And then finally, just on those kind of outcome measures and what will be included as part of the impact evaluation. So we'll be using quantitative data on serious violence offences, hospital admissions for assault sharp objects, any attendances, as well as a range of educational outcomes, including permanent exclusion, suspensions, absences, and post-16 participation. And this is to kind of map against the safe intended outcomes that Ed mentioned earlier, so improving attendance, improving behaviour, and reducing vulnerability to and involvement in serious violence. So that's it from me. So I think, is it questions now? I'll pass that to Gail.
Thanks, Ed and Alice. That's really, really interesting. And I've certainly learned a lot just from listening to you, which I wasn't aware of before. We've got a few questions in the chat, and also I'd encourage anybody in the audience who wants to raise their hand with any questions as well. But to kick us off, we've got a couple of questions from Joe Hobbs. The first one is, are children and young people involved in creating the strategic needs assessment and plan? Maybe Ed or Alice, you might want to answer that first.
Yeah, happy to. So they're very involved in the sort of shaping and co-designing of the actual interventions, and for example, shaping how the mentoring interventions run in different areas. It does come down to the different task forces as to the level of that engagement, but we're really keen to support that as much as possible. And I think in terms of the next question, which sorry Gail, there was a question about being spoken to about their experiences.
Yeah, there's
children.
There's another question from Carla Tiramani, which is sort of related to Joe's. So in terms of the qualitative evaluation, are children, young people being spoken to about their experiences of SAFE? And also there's reference there to the AP Taskforce, which is a parallel programme, and what they felt helped, good, bad, etc.
Yeah, so in answer to that, yes, we definitely are. I mean, Alice can talk about the actual independent evaluation, but in terms of our kind of feedback and engagement with children and young people, we definitely are. Often the voices of children and young people are the most powerful kind of advocates, and also to get the strongest feedback. So across both programs, SAFE and APST, we are definitely speaking to the young people involved in it. But Alice, do you want to speak about the evaluation, the actual independent evaluation?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think we're definitely exploring how we can kind of incorporate children's feedback and their voice into that independent evaluation, and kind of the information that's being collected by task forces themselves. I think fundamentally the independent evaluation is looking at kind of like the whole programme level, but as Ed says, we're also doing a piece of work kind of monitoring at the individual level with task forces collecting their own data, and we're very keen to utilise that as well. So yeah, I think it's coming from that strand of work as well.
Thanks, Alice. Joe or Carla, did you want to come back at all on that question, those questions? If not, we've got a follow-on question from Joe. Will the impact evaluation be able to see if there is a difference in the combination of interventions? Probably for you again, Alice.
Yeah. It won't be able to test or to kind of provide information on whether certain groups of intervention are more effective than others. Just because of the nature of delivery, like it's so different in all the different areas, and and children are being selected for specific interventions. So there's lots of factors which would just make that kind of too complicated to give a robust answer. But we are looking at whether we can do some intervention level evaluation of impact to look at the kind of effectiveness of specific interventions, as well as the kind of like programme as a whole level.
Thank you, Alice. Hopefully that answers the question, Jo. We've got a few more questions in the chat. We've got one from Emily. Is there a plan, Emily Jackson, is there a plan post-March? And then if I just take the one above, there is a question from Sandra Beaton. It's unclear if and how both the child's experience in and out of school is being addressed. So who would like to say that? Ed, do you want to have a go at the in and out of school question? And then probably about the plan post March 25.
Yeah, of course. Apologies, Sandra, if I kind of misunderstood the question, and please jump in if I do. But the program, the interventions that are being delivered through SAFE aren't just kind of within a school grounds or within the school. These are, a lot of after school activities and mentoring to address kind of a range of needs. So it's not just about, intervention specifically within the school day or within the school grounds. Again, apologies if I've misunderstood. Plan post March 25. I bet Anna, Jeremy, and Ginny have probably got their ears peeled for this as well. At the moment, we have funding until March 2025, at the end of the financial year. We are, taking the learning from SAFE, and we are definitely thinking about the options after March 25, but there is no fixed kind of plan in place at the moment. Unfortunately, this programme is funded until March 25, and that's the current position.
Thank you, Ed. Very clear there. So we've got a question about exclusions from Sam Dunker. Are there still going to be exclusions for children on the programme? And how are you measuring if the rate of exclusion may have slowed for this group? Is there a control group to compare with?
Alice, do you want to?
Yeah, sorry, I was just reading the question. Yeah, so the kind of the exact approach that that the evaluation will take in terms of the kind of statistical analysis and the comparison group is still being decided, but we are hoping to use pupil level data, so we will be able to look at kind of exclusions rate pre-SAFE and then the exclusions rate kind of following SAFE. But in terms of the kind of exact approach to that is still being worked out.
Thanks, Alice. And I'll take this as the final question before we move on to Anna and Jeremy and Bradford. But there's a question here again about exclusions. So in terms of the evaluation, is there going to be an analysis of whether young people are accessing appropriate education provision, i.e. part-time table, undiagnosed need being addressed, etc.?
So Alice, jump in if I'm getting this wrong, but that's beyond the scope and the remit of this programme. I will have to check in with my colleagues across the department who work on this area to find an answer for you as to whether or not another analysis, a different analysis, is going on about this. Alice, jump in if I'm wrong, but that's kind of beyond the scope of this particular programme.
Sorry, can you get off mute? I would agree with that. I think it's beyond the scope. And just to say on the there's obviously been a couple of questions on exclusions. That isn't the only outcome that we're looking at. We are also aware that they are also like rare events in a way. So in terms of change, we're not expecting to necessarily see huge differences, and that's why there are the other outcomes that we're looking at, and we're also considering which ones are kind of primary outcomes and which ones are secondary to make sure we're really kind of capturing, you know, all the different outcomes that are hopefully that are kind of different desired outcomes, and we're measuring them across the programme, not just kind of focusing in on one or two.
Thanks, Alice. That's really clear. Sandra, I didn't know if you just put your hand up. Did you want to come back on that? Because I know that was one of your questions about exclusions.
No, sorry. My question was about in and out of school experience. Thank you, Ed, for kind of clarifying. I think you were referring to the interventions of mentoring, and I can't remember what the other ones were. But what I had in mind was the knowledge, belief that, say, for example, the two times where children are most vulnerable are traveling to and out of school, and yes, this is where all the violence seizes and kicks off. So yeah, I'm just wondering how you're addressing that. Can't hear you.
I think you're on mute.
Apologies, I've got a new headset where I have to unmute myself twice. So a lot of that is down to each task force, and as part of their kind of strategic needs assessment to identify, is that a particular risk within that area that, and one that they would like to target. You'll see that there are some different programs. So I think, Jeremy and Anna, there's one on school home support in Bradford, and I'm sure there's a few others that perhaps you'll touch on later on. But there are definitely interventions that do support, sort of, as you say, Sandra, before the school day, after the school day, and also at home as well as in school. So I'm hoping if we move on to the second half and understand what's going on in Bradford and Haringey, that might give you a bit more kind of clarity and examples of where that's happening.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Nice segue into introducing Anna and Jeremy from Bradford. Welcome. Really looking forward to hearing about how your project's going in Bradford. So over to you both with your presentation, and then after that we'll move straight on to Ginny to present from Haringey, and then take a further set of Q&A at the end.
Thank you.
All right, fabulous. Thanks, Gail. Sandra, just in a quick answer to your question before I get going. Short answer is yes, and we'll cover it a bit later in the presentation about before and after school and working outside of school and to where the needs are. Hi, everybody. My name's Jeremy. I'm the project coordinator for the Bradford Safe Taskforce. I thought we'd probably just start our segment here with a little bit of context about Bradford. Feel it's a frequently misunderstood place. Perhaps doesn't have the same reputation as some other larger cities around the country, and it's a surprisingly large city in many ways. So in terms of population, Bradford is bigger than Liverpool, it's bigger than Bristol, it's bigger than Newcastle, and all the attendant issues that a city of that size, encounters. It's also a place that's it's frequently associated with, I guess, urban deprivation, decay, those sorts of things. But it's also Bronte country. It's beautiful landscapes, pretty villages, all that sort of stuff. In 1910, it was the richest place, or one of the richest cities in Europe, thanks to textiles and wool and all those industries as well. Started to decline really significantly around the time of the First World War, and it's been a century now of pretty much continuous decline. Until you can see here in 2001, there was some pretty significant riots, which really, I guess, thrust the city into public consciousness again. And in speaking to a lot of school leaders around, a lot of people feel the city has never really properly recovered from that kind of unrest that happened 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago now. So things have not been heading in a great direction. So just to look at that kind of intro a little bit more scientifically. So from being one of the richest places in Europe, Bradford now is one of the poorest 10% local authorities in England. There's really staggering levels of inequality, to be honest. So if you look at the map on the top right here, this is from the IMD 2019. I'm sure most people here will be aware of this, but the areas shaded in red are amongst the top 10 most deprived areas in England, and the area shaded in blue is amongst the bottom 10 most deprived. So you can really see there's a big divide between where there's some quite significant wealth and some really significant deprivation as well. Bradford local authority, like many local authorities at the moment, is in serious financial trouble. There's a trust in place running children's services, and as well, schools are really not in a great place. There's a lot of schools that are rated as inadequate or requires improvement by Ofsted. And I think you can probably guess from looking at the heat map on the top right where those kind of schools are located. We have a big problem with attendance. It's very, very low, and exclusions are rising rapidly in the city as well. We thought as well, it's just important to note the map at the bottom right of this slide here shows the geographical spread of young persons' violence across the Bradford local authority. So you can see how much that is correlated to the areas and pockets of deprivation there. All right.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Anna Wallace, the commissioning lead for the Bradford Safe Taskforce. So I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about our governance structure and our commissioning cycles and processes. So in Bradford, the model for SAFE is under section 14, funding and led by Exceed Academies Trust. And here on the slide, you can see our governance structure, steering group members and primary and secondary stakeholders. The benefits of the project being part of a multi-academy trust are firstly that we are embedded within a school and have a strong foundation of working relationships already with the majority of schools that were invited to join the task force. We also understand the day-to-day workings of a school and the challenges of implementing projects within these complex settings. Additionally, we're also used to working in a child-centred way, and from the very beginning, interventions were organised, identified and delivered by schools and alongside young people. In Bradford, we began the SAFE project in February 2022, and from the start, we felt very strongly that in order to successfully identify need, we had to go through a rigorous process of consultation. So to do this, we captured the voice of young people, communities and schools through focus groups and surveys. We designed a number of questionnaires with support from the Children's Commissioner's research team, and kindly the lead researcher who developed the Big Ask advised us in creating an accessible, ethically reviewed survey aimed at children and communities. This process was supported by the Task Force schools, and with their help we had an excellent response. As you can see on the slide, we had 431 responses to our community voice survey and 1,729 responses to the student voice. This data was underpinned by a commissioned Bradford-based strategic needs analysis, and within the SNA, current services were mapped, and by also engaging with key stakeholders, we ensured that services weren't duplicated. Following consultation, we identified 5 priority areas and target cohorts. The first need was based upon social and emotional regulation. So students and pupils who are struggling to manage their emotions and or social interactions. Schools also identified an increase in incidents where pupils are dysregulated and are unable to self-regulate. And this is then leading to violent outbursts and incidents within schools. Need 2 is antisocial behaviour. Now, this was largely based in and around the community through threatening behaviour, intimidation, theft, the swarming of shops, graffiti smashing windows and damaged buses, and then this was creating an overspill into schools. Need 3, we identified developmental delay in social language. Now, schools also reported delayed social language as a significant factor leading to conflicts, threats and actual aggression. Common features of this being an overreaction to relatively low-level issues and an inability to manage conflict and not backing down from confrontation. Need 4 was mental health, specifically social, emotional and mental health as a significant factor. Now, we understand that this links closely with Need 1, but we felt that this needed separate consideration. And as Jeremy mentioned earlier, Need 5 is related to attendance. We also identified an increasing area of concern, which was girls' involvement with serious violence. Now, at this time and at this point in the consultation process, this was seen as an emerging issue, but actually later on formed the basis for one of our larger scale interventions. So using all this data gathered, we designed the service model for each intervention. And this was based upon a graduated model of support, as you can see here on the slide. Now, the first tier of this support is the universal element, which is targeted at whole staff awareness around an intervention, continued professional development and targeted training for key staff, alongside curriculum development opportunities. Within this section, it also includes pastoral events such as assemblies. Now, the core intervention includes referral to referral mechanisms to each intervention, training of core school staff and internal specialist teams, assessment and triage, action planning, and that direct support, or that direct one-to-one support with young people. And the third mechanism is referral to specialist support, so referral to professional agencies for pupils who are presenting with more complex needs and formal assessments.
Okay, so that's all the preparatory work that went on. So this is fast forward now to January 2024, and you can see that we are now fully operational in 18 secondary schools, 44 primary schools, and we have commissioned 8 discrete interventions to meet the priority needs which Anna described there. Yeah, we've got 42 staff members now working on safe Taskforce funded projects, and really pleasingly we broke through that 1,000 individual at-risk children supported this January. So really pleased to see the reach is now spreading pretty rapidly through SAFE. I'll give you some idea now about the individual interventions that we have running in schools. I mean, there's only 20 minutes for this whole presentation, and I could spend probably half an hour at least on most of these. So I'll just give you a quick overview of each individual intervention. Please feel free to contact me afterwards or contact Anna, and we can fill you in some more information if you are interested. So meeting our priority needs 1, 2, 4, and 5, we commissioned an organisation called Commando Joes to work on some social skills training for us. So Commando Joes run a comprehensive, I have to say, character education curriculum, which looks at developing their RESPECT framework, which stands for resilience, empathy, self-awareness, etc. Really highly trained practitioners working in school with targeted cohorts. Some really strong resources to accompany the program as well. CJs are delivering in 15 schools for us, and at last count, we're supporting 344 individuals at risk of violence. Really been well received in our schools, so really pleased with how all that's going. The second project I've got listed here is a partnership with St Giles Trust. So this is a mentoring project. And as Anna mentioned, one of the emerging needs that was identified in our initial preparation was the rising amount of girls who were involved in quite serious violent incidents. And so this is a gender-specific program which focuses on the needs of girls in particular. That's both as victims and perpetrators, and it looks at some of those issues around toxic relationships and coercive control and those sorts of things as well. So it's, yeah, it's a slightly different approach with this project. Moving on very quickly, the third project we're funding here is called School Home Support, or SHS. This project works probably mainly outside of the school as well as in school, so it's very much an attendance-focused project. School Home Support work much more intensively, perhaps, than some of our other projects. Have quite small caseloads, and they do whatever it takes for those families who are really experiencing multiple and complex challenges to their children attending school. Yeah, so again, in response to that question of things happening outside of school, that, you know, School Home Support really does work in that, you know, the whole family systems approach, whatever it takes, really. The fourth intervention I've got listed here is our biggest intervention. This is the Youth Engagement and Support Project, the YES project, and it's a partnership with the Youth Justice Service in Bradford. The YES project offers like a real range of social skills, you know, training, development packages And they also offer a lot of mentoring for young people referred to the programme by schools. We also have four other smaller projects, just in terms of numbers, but no less important, of course. So we work with the City of Bradford Traded Service to purchase additional educational psychology sessions. So in year one, we purchased 150 sessions. Each session is worth about 3 hours. So it's about 450 hours worth of educational psychology we purchased. The idea being that this would go towards identifying young people at a much earlier stage. So working primary schools mainly in the first year. Now in the second year, it's now supporting those young people through that transition into secondary schools. So that's an ongoing project there. The second intervention I've got down here is a hyper-local attendance project. So this works only in the BD4 postcode, which has 3 schools in that catchment. And if you cast your minds back to the very first slide, which looks at the deprivation, the area is highly shaded in red, that's where BD4 is focused. So again, to answer your question, do projects work around the start of the school day and whatnot? So key workers from this programme work in that that journey to school time, that 8 to 10 a.m., helping young people get to school and resolving issues around that period of time. They also do work in school as well, and whatever's really required for the young people who've been referred to that programme. So breaking the cycle, I've had a long presence in BD4. They do have extensive knowledge and relationships in the area, so we're pleased with how that's going as well. And again, in answer to the question, we provide some money for after schools programmes as well. So in participating schools, we allocate some of money for arts and sporting activities that provides basically supervision in that window between 3 and 5, when our data shows there's significant amounts of youth violence happening in that after school window. And yeah, just in year one, we've closed this project now, but we rolled out training for key staff in schools around identifying speech and language issues, making policy referrals. So these could be picked up earlier, and that met our priority need number 3.
Thank you. So as projects have now become embedded within schools, we've moved to a model of business as usual. So our next phase is quality assurance, impact monitoring and horizon scanning. So part of this process includes responding to need. Each of the providers discussed has flexibility within their approaches to allow them to respond to student need and school identified concerns. To support this process, we meet with the Taskforce schools as a group and then also visit with them individually each half term. Alongside this, the providers meet each term in order to develop relationships, collaboratively problem solve, and to provide each other with project updates. Meeting with the steering group also provides additional insights and horizon scanning. So as part of impact monitoring, we've started to analyse Bradford-wide aggregated data, and early analysis of recently published data from the Youth Justice Board shows a drop in serious youth violence within the city. Although this isn't correlated with individual projects, we know that SAFE will have played a part. Although this is positive, it's important to remember the significant issues facing the city that were discussed at the start of this presentation. Bradford is facing a crisis point, and if or when Taskforce services end, these will in no doubt have an impact. So alongside analysing the citywide data, it's important to focus on the impact of the project on the individual young people we are supporting. So here on the slide is an example of initial data gathered from an attendance focused project. Although these figures might not impact whole school attendance data when looking at the 90% or less persistently absent cohort, the impact for individual students is significant. So if we look at the slide and we focus on TMC, their attendance has improved from nothing to 64%. Now this is the equivalent to 3 days a week in school. We know that education is a huge protective factor, and that when they're in school, the young person is more likely to engage within school life. Therefore, we are more able to implement intervention strategies, and also they're more likely to attend an after-school club and again re-engage.
Yeah, we thought we can't really talk about SAFE without talking about some of the challenges that we've had along the way. Of course, it's not all been smooth sailing at all. Far from it, to be honest. I think if you spoke to any of the SAFE task forces across the country, school capacity would probably come up as the #1 issue that you see. Obviously, we have had 8 separate projects running. Implementing those in schools has an impact on school staff, and one thing school staff do not have a lot of is time. So I don't put this slide here to. I'm not pointing the finger or anything like that. It's just the way it is at the moment. It just creates a bottleneck to delivery. And I put a couple of graphs here from the TES. As you can see, this is a very recent article, so you can see something 90-something% of people working in schools consider high workload to be an issue. I mean, that says a lot, really, doesn't it? And I think we're all aware of the fact that there's not enough teachers being recruited as well. All of these things, the compound and create issues. And what that's meant for us is we have had staggered delivery in some places. Some schools are way ahead, going absolutely fantastically, when others are struggling to get to the ground, and so that creates differences, in perceptions and whatnot of how SAFE is working and effectiveness and all that sort of stuff. So that's something that we constantly trying to overcome, and we do try to be as light touch with the schools as possible. But inevitably, we're always going to have an impact when we're running things within schools. We can't go past challenges without talking about deprivation, to be honest. It's the sheer scale of the deprivation is pretty shocking, to be honest, in Bradford at times. The stories we hear, it's Victorian, some of the stuff that we see, and that creates a real issue for the delivery of our programmes. I'm sure most people on the call are well aware of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where if you're at the bottom, you need to meet each particular level of need before you can move on to the next one. Most of our projects are pitched around this kind of cognitive STEAM needs level, but what we're finding is that many of the young people referred to our projects really are not even having the basic physiological needs of food and shelter and whatnot being met. There's 4 separate pictures here from 4 separate programs of what our practitioners are having to do before they can even get to the work they're meant to be doing, if that makes sense. You've got bootload of food being delivered to children who are involved in SAFE Taskforce projects, bread being donated, school uniform being donated in the bottom right picture there, and probably most shockingly, that pair of shoes that a young girl was having to use until we got them replaced. So these are the kind of challenges, these are the kind of barriers that young people are having in our locality.
But despite these challenges, feedback from young people and parents is positive, as you can see from this slide. And actually, this is a real testimony to the dedication and the tenacity of each of the providers and the services that they offer for young people. On the slide, you can see a sample of handwritten notes, text messages directly to providers, and statements from schools. One young person has stated that they are hoping to become a youth worker themselves. Each of these projects collects student voice as part of their ongoing processes. Now, this can take the form of My Star analysis, Family Star, and other methods of capturing feedback. All qualitative data is included in our monitoring and reporting processes. And recently gathered feedback from schools is overwhelmingly positive and supportive of the project. The big question that schools are asking us is what happens post-March 2025. Right, thank you for listening, everybody. If you would like some more information about Bradford SAFE specifically, please do visit our website, where you will find a short film about what has been going on in SAFE. Also, please do feel free to email Jeremy or myself. And I will stop sharing. And if you have any questions, please let us know.
Thank you, Anna and Jeremy. That was really, really fascinating. I love that slide at the end. I mean, they are very, very powerful messages coming from families there. There's loads and loads of questions coming up in the chat. But before we take them, we're going to move over to Ginny, who's going to talk to us about the Haringey project, and then we'll take the questions all together, because there may well be some similarity between the projects. So Ginny, over to you if you want to share your slides.
Okay, thank you. Can you see those slides?
We can, thank you. And you sound absolutely fine as well.
Great. Okay, thank you. So if I just start to introduce myself, I'm Ginny Thorne. I'm the Haringey Safe Taskforce Commissioning Lead. And joining me today to discuss one of our interventions that we've commissioned is my colleague Gifford Sutherland, who's the CEO at Upskill U Safe Mentoring Project. So just to commence the slideshow, to give you some context of Haringey as a borough. Haringey as a London borough has really sort of, it's ranked 49th amongst the 317 local authorities in England. As you can see from the map in front of you, the borough is contrasting in a borough of two halves, so has a number of deprived wards in the east of the borough, and in contrast to that, it has a number of more affluent areas in the west side of the borough. So Haringey includes some more deprived areas such as Tottenham, Northumberland Park, and then it includes areas such as Muswell Hill and Highgate. So quite an interesting contrast of different areas there. Just to move on from that, as Haringey and its characteristics, it's a highly diverse borough, famous for Alexandra Palace, but it has a rich culture with strong community relations. It has 180 languages spoken. It has a number of young people. Under 18, we have a population of, which is 21% of the population, being 55,000 children. And our GCSE attainment levels are good in that they're in the top and second quartile and better than national averages, and Haringey is closing the attainment gaps for our Black and Caribbean and African children. As a borough, there are 12 secondary schools and 60 primary schools. So that gives you a context of the overview of our borough. Our Safe Taskforce board is schools-led. It's a slightly different model to Bradford in that it's administered through a Section 31 grant model rather than a local multi-academy trust. The schools decided that they would delegate the management of the grant to local authority, but nevertheless are wholly engaged through consultation on the decisions and approved recommendations via our Safe Taskforce board. The benefit of this model is that the ALA is well positioned to undertake the role through access to centralised data, a number of strategic links with services including social care, youth services, health, early help, to name a few, as well as education itself. The board came together more frequently at the beginning, but moving to the BAU, it meets termly now. It has strong representation from local secondary heads. 8 heads sit on the Safe Taskforce board, virtual school colleagues, a number of lead officers from different departments and health, to name a few representatives who form our regular Safe Taskforce board meetings. As part of the design and delivery model, we undertook the strategic needs assessment at the beginning, has been referenced, and as part of undertaking that, the schools were widely consulted and survey responses were collected from them. So key messages were taken from those survey responses in putting together that SNA. For example, the data analysis included data around suspensions with reasons behind those suspensions, which vary across different schools, permanent exclusion data. This is not an exhaustive list because there was a number of features in it, but it was granular in terms of school level data, ward level data, picking up youth justice data, as well as social care data, and a number of other indicators were captured within the SNA. So as part of the SNA as well, the serious youth violence hotspots were mapped out and identified in terms of types of crime, times of day that crime was taking place. And you can see from this map as well that the serious youth violence hotspots do correlate as a whole with the map shown earlier, demonstrating that unfortunately that although there are some points of crime in the West. On the whole, many of the serious youth violence hotspots are in the more deprived parts of the borough in the east. So from there, the priority cohorts were identified within the SNA, and again, to sort of highlight some of these priority cohorts, on the whole, it was mainly boys and young men in secondary education who were experiencing challenges, and the siblings of those young people and the children known to children's services who were identified as the priority cohorts. I think, as Bradford have demonstrated, yes, there was some qualitative data showing that there was involvement of girls to some degree, but in Haringey, I think the main priority cohorts of need that were identified were boys and young men. And therefore, moving on to our commissioning, development and design plans, interventions were targeted to those most needed, and a mapping and an assessment of existing services took place to ensure that the gaps were addressed, to avoid duplication where services were already in place, and opportunities for upscaling existing services were reviewed as part of those commissioning plans. Throughout all this process, there was regular collaboration and consultation with the board stakeholders to consider how the grant should be allocated accordingly and aligned with the SAFE criteria. And also, alongside this, extensive market testing and market scoping took place with providers to understand their offer, look at their evidence bases, look at their capacity and ability to meet local need. And the second stage of the commissioning process was presenting the evidence gathered and options and proposals to the board. And that was an iterative process where the board approved decisions and recommendations to commission in principle. And through gaining that approval, the Taskforce undertook some tender processes to identify some mentoring and social skills providers. And as an early stage, young people were empowered through co-production with a group of students to evaluate providers through a pre-qualification question, which was a gateway question. I'm not going to read it out verbatim, but it's on there for your perusal, which was really about the provider talking directly to the young people and the young people responding to that by scoring that question as an initial stage. Not all providers passed that first stage, but those that did pass progressed to the second stage of the evaluation, which was a panel evaluation by school professionals and local authority professionals. And as the outcome of that progressed, 5 interventions were commissioned in Haringey. Our target overall is to reach 200 young people per year. And through that, we are delivering now 5 interventions. They've all been live since September. The first 2 have been live since July 2022, pardon me. But just to give you, I'm not going to go into too much detail because I'm conscious of time here, but just to sort of give you a whistle-stop tour of our interventions, we've got secondary outreach being delivered across all mainstream secondary schools in Haringey, and that is a well-received intervention across our schools, and it's a key part of our local offer now. We've also got transitions outreach in our primary and secondary school. That is for the younger cohort who are transitioning from year 6 to year 7 to support them with that challenging time when they transition from primary to secondary school. And that is delivered by the same service provider as the secondary outreach. So there's good continuity there for a child that may need a longer term intervention. We also have our mentoring service, which I won't dwell too much on because Gifford will give you the detail on that one. We've got our social skills programme delivered by a provider called Football Beyond Borders. They're well regarded locally. They're already having an impact. They've been delivering since September 2023, but they're delivering 2 social skills programmes in our secondary schools. We also have Think and Connect Social Workers, which has been a programme that's developed and designed to deliver cognitive behavioural approaches in 3 of our secondary schools with the highest levels of need. So that's that in a nutshell, but as I say, I can happily speak to anybody about that in more detail if you'd like to contact me after. Again, moving on to some qualitative feedback that we've already had from our young people and parents. We've had lots of positive feedback from them, and some good messages, some very convincing messages in terms of how well it's regarded and the difference that it's making there. So to name a few, again, these services are being enjoyed by young people, and the parents themselves are appreciating the difference that the support is making. As an example, it's great to know that there are people in the school supporting our boys. So that is one of the key messages that we're taking from that. I'm just going to hand over to my colleague Gifford now to give a spotlight on safe mentoring. Over to you, Gifford.
Thank you very much for the introduction. As just to mention, we were one of the organisations that were commissioned in by Safe Taskforce to deliver the mentoring provision within Haringey, and it was a particular approach to developing quite a unique style of mentoring. To give you an insight into how it works, when we're talking about within our mentoring process, we're a restorative organisation. And as we know with restorative practice, it's something that is expanded and being definitely taken on board by a lot of schools throughout the UK. And our approach is work with young people about taking responsibility and ownership around some of the risk factors that may well be affecting them. The mentoring program itself is designed to offer 12 months of sustained long-term support. And it's one thing that came out of the commissioning process, the need to have a type of intervention that could work with a young person through a journey as they bond and build and develop a relationship with that young person, and the mentor assuming a role as a trusted adult. We identified a number of key outcomes that we wanted to drive towards working with the young people through, namely self-identity, their attitudes and values around some of the risk factors that may well lead to them being at risk of offending. Real focus on the risk and consequences of those risk-taking decisions that they make and leading to conflict and choices, and a lot also focus around the influences that they have in their life, both negative and positive, and some of the crucial decisions that they're making both in and outside of school. And a big focus around that was supporting the young people, not only just during term time, but also supporting them during the holiday season. So as a big part of our delivery is in that way. And some of the solutions that we can work towards them. So with the mentoring provision as a year, we've broken it down into 3 distinct phases. We had an intensive phase, which is the first 12 weeks of the program, where the young person is taken through a structured mentoring program that looks at particular issues that have been identified as risk factors, and through that structured program, working with a mentor, they then address those key issues that placing them at risk. And we then review the progress of that young person at the end of the 12-week period, and then we move them onto a transitional phase where they then focus on more longer-term goals, and that would include relationship with families and support network that sits around that. And then as part of the sort of last ending closing phase of the mentoring program, whilst the mentoring provision scales down to working on alternate weeks, what we've done is we've introduced quite a unique concept, which is about the use of circles of support and accountability. So this is a use of a restorative circle where you're bringing in volunteers from the local community as trusted adults, and they form a support network around each of the young people. So each young person meets with this COSA on an alternate week basis to build an additional network of support that sits outside of the family and outside of the school. One of the things that we identified that's been lacking with a lot of the young people at risk is that they haven't got a network of positive, trusted adults in their life. And we felt that by extending this, that formed a big part of the support that we could have around the young people. What's really important in relation to the choice of the mentors that's used from the program is that we selected a team of mentors that come with their own lived experience. And it's using mentors that have been excluded from school, have been out of the education system. Some have been involved in serious youth violence or have lived experience around some of the issues that we're trying to work with the young people around. And they're able to use that lived experience to draw on it in an informed way when in trying to engage and deal with the young people. We're in a strong position of having quite a large pool of mentors to choose from a range of diverse backgrounds to match the diversity of the requirement of the schools in Haringey. So that's the first slide. If we can move it on to the next one. So it really is very important just to mention, as I said, our model, which is focused around the lived experience of the mentors and working closely with the families. And as we'll see in some of the outcomes, in many instances, we've actually worked not only with the young person in the school setup, but also providing additional support with the family in a holistic way. So how's the project performed to date? Ginny mentioned earlier on about there's 12 schools, secondary schools in the borough. We're now engaging with 8 of those 12 schools are now actively participating on the programme. So we've managed to really hit those essential schools that's relevant in those key hotspot areas. We've targeted specifically working with young people between the ages of 11 and 14 that we found are having the highest levels of need. And as I said, in total, we've had 32 referrals. We were oversubscribed with referrals, and we actually had to control that process because so many of the schools just wanted to refer as many young people as possible. But what we had to do is sort of rein it back into to do it on a very controlled way so we could manage that throughput. So of those referred, and remembering that some of the young people referred were currently either going through their own issues around attendance issues around that. We had 78% conversion of those participating. All 25 families consulted and were involved in the actual supporting of the intervention. And we've had 14 of those families actually receiving additional support that we've offered through them in terms of systemic family therapy and support for those individuals. The most common reason for the referrals tended to be challenging or aggressive behaviour in school, low self-esteem, or some being victims of bullying or other related behavioural issues that sat around that. And so that was the feedback that we received from 6 of the 8 schools that's been involved so far. So going forward from that, of the 25 participants that we've had that were originally started on the programme, a majority of those, in fact, 100% of those have carried on all the way through. We're now at about the 5-month stage within the process of that year's worth of support. And the feedback from them has actually been quite outstanding. I mean, I've just given one highlight. We've had a 14-year-old who, from being in a position of being a risk of exclusion, after 4 months of intervention on the mentoring program, working with a mentor, they've now achieved their highest number of commendations in their year group, and they received 10 achievement points for contribution towards lessons. So for working with someone that was completely disengaged, by having that sustained support, we've been able to transform that individual to actively participating and being able to see the benefits of their education. So that's it from me. Just over back to you, Ginny.
That's really great and very powerful. Thank you so much, Gifford. So I'm just going to very quickly wrap up so that we've got lots of time for questions. Just to sum up, really, our processes are we're measuring success and impact through regular meetings with all of our providers. And oh, slides have disappeared. I don't know what's happened there. Shall I just reshare very quickly?
Yeah, that's great, Ginny. I don't think the last one moved on because I know, Gifford, you said, can you move on the slide? So we were on
sorry
the
about
first.
that.
No worries. We were all on slide 12, but obviously we could tell that you'd moved on to the next slide.
Right. Well, I'll just very quickly sum up. There's just 2 more slides, but I'm not going to. I mean, I'm sure these can be circulated after, but just to sort of again, we're monitoring our interventions through regular meetings with providers, capturing data, including qualitative feedback and individual case studies, which are being provided. And we're embedding the use of tools with our providers, such as examples, the Outcome Star, Strength and Difficulties questionnaire to measure individual level outcomes, and the distance travelled. Our next steps are, whilst the official end date is the end of March 2025, our programme has actually had some flexibility to continue until the end of the summer term 2025. So it will be winding down coterminous with the end of that term, hopefully. So that's our, that is our plan really. It's just a little bit easier that way to manage the end of the programme or continue sustainability plans as they emerge. And between now and then, we're absolutely sort of aiming to collect lots of measures in terms of the long-term impact, the trends, evidence of outcomes across the system, including reviewing all the system-wide data we can get our hands on, such as attendance data and some of what my Bradford colleagues have already alluded to there, to assess the benefits and value provided by the services. And we're also going to be, as part of that, considering avenues and budget streams for sustainability and long-term funding resources for continuity, where the evidence of the positive impact supports a case for continuity. So that's all from me. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks, Ginny. Thanks, Gifford. Really enlightening presentation there. And we've got absolutely tons of questions. We'll do our very best to get through them all. But if we don't manage it in the time, I know Bradford and Haringey have, I think, are happy to be contacted. So we can, because they're very specific site questions, hopefully you'll be able to contact them. We've got their details that we can circulate with the slides, etc., and ask them directly. Thanks, Joe, for that comment. It's some really impressive work. So I'll start off going back. There's a couple of questions from Rachel Roberts in the chat, specifically for Bradford. So one is, what was your overall budget? Rachel was interested in hearing about that. And also, in terms of the core intervention, what assessment tool did you use, and was this done by school staff? And lastly, from Rachel, are you measuring impact on first-time entrants into the criminal justice system as part of the outcomes?
Okay, so just to take the first question, so the total funding for the whole of the Bradford Safe project over the 3 years is 3.37 million. Second question, sorry, was that linked to the assessment activities within the core intervention? So that really is specific to actually to the intervention. So, for example, the support for in-school staff in identifying those young people to take part in a particular intervention, will take mentoring, for example. So that initial triage would take place internally with schools, but they would have had training and guidance in those key indicators for the project. For example, a young person becoming either withdrawn or disengaged within education, low-level disruption, refusal to comply, other early indicators, and then in school they would refer to the most appropriate intervention to support that student. Hope that answers your question.
I think we should on an impact as well was, are we measuring first-time entrance to the justice system for young people? Short answer, yes. That's a specific metric for the YES project, which is one of our projects. We've had some early data on that. We were really hoping to share that with you today, but the Youth Justice Board said it's not public yet, so we couldn't share a very, very good-looking graph with you. But it's looking like there is some kind of impact, yes.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jeremy and Anna. We'll take a question now for Ginny and Gifford. And there's two questions that look quite similar, one from Dawn Warner and one from Gwen. Are all interventions for 12 months? And what happens at the end of the intervention if the young person still requires support?
I mean, I can answer that from my side. With our particular intervention, no, it is quite unique in the sense that it is the only one that's running for such a long length of time. At the end of, as part of the exit program, there's a formal exit interview for each of the young people, and there's a RAG rating which is carried out in terms of where the assessment of the young person is at the time. And for those that are still identified as needing more support, they will be referred straight into Haringey's got an existing community gold project, which is a community-based intervention. So they're referred directly into that for additional support beyond the length of the program as part of that exit process.
Thanks, Gifford. Yeah, exactly. That's Gifford's intervention specifically does that. And I think when we were commissioning the interventions, we used the toolkit, the F toolkit, and the evidence base, which I think did evidence the impact of longer term interventions having more impact. But some of our other interventions vary in their length, but it is very personalised to the young person. As an example, our Safe Taskforce outreach model, the transitions outreach for the younger cohort of primary to secondary age, that actually runs for a term. So it runs from the last term when they're in primary school through to the first half term in secondary. But if that young person is identified as perhaps needing a longer term support, they then transfer to the Safe Taskforce Secondary, which is another sister intervention for the older cohort. And then as another example, our Football Beyond Borders social skills intervention, that actually runs for 2 years. So it's longer term and it's a different dynamic. So it's a mixed group, and it's a group dynamic of a sports program and some classroom activities, modular. So it runs longer. The cognitive behavioural approaches again may vary according to the young person's individual needs, but certainly the idea as was identified in our theories of change is for all these services to be linked into our existing systems, so that if a young person may be identified as needing some other more targeted service, the pathways are put in place to ensure that happens. So we're trying to embed a system-wide approach so that it's part of a continuum of other services rather than sitting out as an isolated intervention. And that's we still carry on working on that daily.
Thanks, Ginny. Thank you. I think we've got time for a couple more questions. We've had one from Jenny Adamson about Bradford's robust approach to commissioning the interventions, and I think we could probably say the same for Haringey. And a question about whether violence reduction units are all required to commission in this way. I think I can probably answer that in the sense, but obviously Bradford and Haringey do chip in. VRUs are required to commission from evidence-based interventions. So that's part of the requirement from the Home Office, and they draw upon the YEF toolkit in a similar way that the Safe Partnerships, the Safe Taskforce do as well. So they are required to commission a percentage, at least a minimum percentage of their interventions from the toolkit where we've identified particular interventions that have got strong evidence base. Questions that I think would probably be relevant across both projects. We've got a question from Joe Hobbs asking, how did you assess the cultural competence of your providers? Bearing in mind that both areas are very culturally diverse. And a second question from Carl, which I think is relevant for both projects as well. Is the support available for any children moving into further education? So the ones that are sort of moving from school during the life of the project elsewhere, and will they continue to get support? Happy for either to kick off with that.
I can, or we can take on just give you a bit of information about working the cultural competence of our interventions. So I guess right from the very start, we used quality impact assessments for everybody that we work with. So it's been part of our thinking from the very start. Our independent chair is the director of the Bradford Hate Crime Alliance. So we've drawn upon his experience and expertise to inform a lot of our activities as well. As Anna sort of went through as well, the consultation and our listening activities with schools identified a few specific areas where that we responded to. So in particular, schools were very keen to have an Eastern European worker or somebody with experience working with Eastern European communities. We've also we've got a large community of migrants from Mirpur in Pakistan, so we have workers directly drawn from that community as well. So yeah, we've put quite a lot of thought and a lot of work into trying to have, I guess, a range of our staff that reflects the communities they are working actually within, and right up to the thought from the very top as well. So.
That's great, thank you, Jeremy. And maybe Ginny and Gifford, would it be possible for you to focus on what happens to children that are leaving the school and moving on to FE or indeed any other places?
Yeah, I think we are certainly, as I say, I think, yeah, we sort of chime with Bradford's approach to the cultural competence, and Gifford and our other providers have evidenced how it was a question as part of our tender processes to ensure that providers are mindful of that and their workforce reflects that. So so it was a key part of our processes in the early stages, and we continue to make sure that that continues as an embedded part. But on the second part of the question, I think we have got kind of finite resources, and I think we are trying to sort of focus this service on like early intervention. So, you know, and it is, you know, the criteria of the Safe Taskforce being the age group 10 to 14. I think we're very conscious that there is quite a lot of demand from those year groups, year 10 and 11. But we are sort of trying to encourage schools to refer earlier where possible. It's not to say that we're not mindful of those other cohorts as well, but that's where I feel like it's a system approach. So Safe Taskforce can meet certain priority cohorts of need and certain age groups, but we want to work in partnership with all the other services, chiming with the Send an AP framework model to ensure that perhaps if a young person does need support going into further and higher education, there are other services so that it's not just, oh dear, their Safe Taskforce intervention has ended. And like Gifford had alluded to there is, we have what's called Haringey Community Gold, which is another funded project through other funding streams. So I think SAFE cannot be everything to everybody, but it is part of that wider picture, as I say. I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Ginny, that's great. We have reached the end of our session. There are a few questions that we've not had time to answer, but as I said earlier, both Bradford and Haringey will be happy to take any specific questions. I know there was one, Bradford, about breaking the cycle, for example. And on Bradford's presentation, there's the email addresses at the end if you want to contact Anna and Jeremy directly. Thank you all for your time today. Hopefully you've got a lot out of it. I certainly have. And also thank you to Ed, Alice, Ginny, Gifford, and Jeremy and Anna as fantastic presenters today. As I said earlier, we will be sending out the recording and the link to the recording and the presentations as well for you to share with your colleagues. So have a great rest of day. Good to see you all.